I'm watching the video that I have on my phone the whole time. I'm just like, I had no emotions. I was just like.
All right, step 1.
Oh yeah,
I think so.
Knock before entering the room. Identify and greet the resident, and explain the procedure to the resident. Perform a hand hygiene and provide privacy.
Hello, Rachel. I'm Amy. I'm going to be your CNA today, and I'm going to be checking your vital signs. Is that okay? Mm-hmm. I'm going to wash my hands, and I'm going to provide for privacy. I'm pretending to close that curtain or shut the door, or maybe shutting the door, depending on what it is, where I'm at. Okay?
Then you're going to position the resident seated or reclined.
So obviously my patient is already seated, right? So I'm going to verbalize. Well, good, you're already seated. That's how I need to do your vital signs anyway, because that's showing the evaluator that you know that your patient is supposed to be seated at that time.
Find the resident's radial pulse by placing your middle 2 or 3 fingers on palm side of resident, wrist on thumb side next to the bone.
Okay, I'm going to check your pulse. If you don't care, you can relax your hand down here. I'm going to go to the center. I'm going to slide over, and I have found her pulse.
So you're going to count for 30 seconds, and you're going to multiply that by 2.
I'm going to count for 30 seconds, and I'm going to in my head, I'm going to multiply it by 2. You do not write it down when you're doing this step, because you have to keep your fingers there, and you have to check you have to count the respirations. They need to think that you are counting their pulse instead of just their respirations. Why do they need to think that you're counting their pulse instead of their respirations?
Because if not, they can change.
If you're consciously thinking about someone counting your respirations, you're going to be in more control of your respirations, rather than if you were to just be breathing normally. When you think about breathing, it changes the way you breathe. It is no longer just the automatic response. Typically, with you guys, when you are working on counting pulse, when you're counting for 30 seconds, when you only count for 30 seconds if it is a regular pulse. If it is irregular, you count for an entire minute. If it is regular, I am used to counting pulse, so I will start on the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, however, and I can very easily go 30 seconds from there and know when to stop. If that's something that's not always going to be easy for you, like if I had started counting on the 10, I'd count till if I started counting on 10, I would count till the second hand got on the 4. If that's not easy for you, I would recommend only doing it at the 12, 3, 6, and 9. That way your 30 seconds, you're just going over half the clock, and it's very easy to notice. Okay?
Okay, so you multiply it by 2, and then you continue to hold the resident's wrist and count when the chest rise for 30 seconds, and you'll multiply that one by 2 as well.
Okay. So when I was checking her pulse, I counted for 30 seconds, and then I immediately went straight, and then I thought, okay, what is that number? It is easier for me not to multiply right then. It is easier for me to just remember the number that I stopped on, and then immediately start counting respirations. You only count when they breathe in. So I was counting from the 3 to the 9 when I did it then. As soon as it hit the 9, I immediately started looking at her chest. She was actually in the middle of an exhale when I started. You do not count exhales. It's inhale only. So when their chest rises, that's what you count. Her respirations were 8. So when we finished, I wrote down my first number was 36 for her heart rate, and I got 8 for respirations. You have to multiply by 2. If you do not multiply by 2, it is incorrect. So 36 times 2 is what?
74.
No, it's 72.
72. 8 times 2 is
16.
So it's okay if we automatically just go ahead and do the respirations, or do we need to wait for the person to read the step? Like, is it okay, like, when we're doing it to go ahead?
you can
and
have
do
your
it?
partner just go ahead and read both steps at the same time.
Okay.
Just go ahead and so if your
Well,
partner
I'm just saying, like, when we're doing the actual
Like, do we have to verbalize to you that we're starting respirations, or do we just go into it?
I'm going to be counting them too.
Okay.
So when I check you off, you're gonna have a hold of one wrist, and I'm gonna have a hold of the other. I'm gonna be looking at the watch. You're gonna be looking at the watch. You're gonna say, "I'm starting now." When you so I'm gonna start at the same time you are. I'm gonna count pulse for 30 seconds, and then I'm immediately going to switch and count
that's what I
respirations for
needed to
30
know,
seconds.
was whether I needed to verbalize that I was going from pulse that. Or
No. Because if you're just gonna verbalize to me that you've started, and that way I know after 30 seconds you're automatically switching to the other. So I'm gonna be counting, and you're gonna be counting at the same time. All right. So I have my pulse and I have my respirations. Now what?
So you already recorded it. Then with the resident seated or reclining, you're gonna lower the entire arm onto a flat surface.
So my patient is sitting. If she wasn't sitting, I would give her the option to lie down if that was needed. All right, I'm gonna have you place your lower arm palm up on the flat surface.
You're gonna expose the arm as much as possible. Squeeze the cuff to expel any remaining air, and turn the valve clockwise on the bulb to close it.
Okay, when you guys put these up, make sure you clip this back on the blood pressure cuff before you put them up and before you take them off so it doesn't bust. Okay, so I need to make sure that there's no extra air in the blood pressure cuff. But in order to do that, I actually need to turn it all the way to the left or counterclockwise first and make sure that it's open. Otherwise, I'm going to squeeze the cuff, and if there's air still in it, it's not going to matter because the valve isn't open. So I've squeezed the cuff. There's no extra air. So now I'm going to turn it clockwise to the right until it meets resistance and stops.
So then you're gonna wrap the cuff snugly around the upper arm, at least 1 inch above the elbow.
All right. So I'm going to go ahead and pull her sleeve up a little. I'm going to hold the cuff like this, and I'm going to have her hold her arm out just a little because I'm going to get all the way up in her armpit. Okay? When I start in her armpit, it lets me know that I'm at least going to be 1 inch above the bend of her arm. So I'm going to make sure that the artery lines up with the brachial artery, which is just to the pinky side of the center of the bend of the arm. I'm going to pull this around tightly, secure it. If I leave this on here, I would just take this and roll it up on the side of the gauge. I tend to prefer to have the gauge off and on the table, but that's completely up to you guys. If you do take it off and put it on the table, I want it snapped back on before you take the blood pressure cuff off so this doesn't get busted. Okay, I have the blood pressure cuff on. It's at least 1 inch above the bend of her arm.
Then you're going to clean the earpieces and the diaphragm of the stethoscope with an alcohol sponge.
All right, I have my alcohol swab. I'm going to clean the earpieces, make sure I get in those holes real good, which you guys are always going to clean the earpieces of your stethoscope before and after use. So when you're practicing this skill over and over and over, you don't get a new alcohol swab every time. You just use the exact same side of the stethoscope, okay? So I cleaned the earpieces. I'm going to clean the diaphragm. And I typically go ahead and clean the bell of it also. All right, so I've cleaned the earpieces and I've cleaned the diaphragm.
Locate the brachial artery at the inner aspect of the elbow.
So typically you are not going to feel the brachial artery because it is deep, but I'm putting my fingers there so that I can say that I know where the brachial artery is. I'm going to go to the center of the bend of the arm, and then I'm going to go slightly off center. If you go too far off center, you're not going to hear anything. If you go straight in the center, some people will hear a blood pressure and some people won't. So you make sure you have the stethoscope in the correct place. Okay, I've located the brachial artery.
Place the earpieces of the stethoscope in your ear.
Stethoscope, earpieces always point forwards. See how my stethoscope is curved and my earpieces are pointing forward. If I had it like this, then the earpieces are pointing towards me instead of away from me. I want them to point away from me. Okay.
All right, and then you're going to place the diaphragm of the stethoscope over the brachial artery.
So I'm going to place the diaphragm over the brachial artery. I prefer to hold mine like this. If you want to hold it like this, it's okay. It's just that this typically gives a little bit more contact when you do it this way, when you hold it kind of like this. It's completely up to you how you do it, as long as you are not putting your thumb on the bell and you're not putting your fingers on the hole, the center of the bell. I forgot what I was going to say. So I prefer to hold it this way. Make sure that you're pressing down. Also, before you put the stethoscope on the arm, tap this side and tap this side and see which one's louder. If this side is louder than this side, you need to turn the diaphragm of the stethoscope. I had a student in my afternoon class that theirs was turned backwards and they couldn't hear anything. So make sure that it's on the right side. All right, so I've got it on the brachial artery.
Inflate the cuff.
Okay, go ahead and read me the next step too, so I'm not stopping.
Loosen the valve and deflate the cuff slowly, noting the systolic and diastolic reading.
Okay, so how many millimeters per second do you release the blood pressure cuff?
2 to 4.
2 to 4. So you have to push down with this. You see, I'm not just laying it on her arm, I'm pushing it down. You're normally going to pump up to about 180. As soon as I heard the last beat, I deflated it completely. I heard the first beat, which is your systolic, at 114. I heard the diastolic at 60. So it's 114 over 60, and you write it like a fraction.
She's consistent. That's what I had whenever we were working together for her.
Good.
Deflate the cuff completely and remove it from the resident's arm.
So I've deflated the cuff. I let all the air out as soon as I heard that last beat. I finished deflating the cuff. Hook this back on because we don't want to break this. We don't want to beat this glass on everything. You're not just going to rip it off. You're going to support it here because that Velcro is pretty tight, and you're going to take it off.
Then you record the blood pressure on the paper, which you already did.
114 over 60.
Then you're going to record reading. It must be within 4 systolic and 4 diastolic, attained by the evaluator, and perform hand hygiene and record and report observations to the nurse.
I'm going to wash hands, report, and record. And that's it.
So for that step, like when we're actually doing it for you, do we just say like wash hands and report and record?
That's what you do. You say,
Okay.
I'm going to wash hands, report, and record. So you get in the habit of every skill you do from here on out for the rest of your life, even in a nursing and health program. The last step is always going to be wash hands, report, and record. Always. Okay, will you stop the video for me?